The air in your room just grew colder, didn't it? That's because some doors, once opened, can never be closed, and some people, once they've locked eyes with you, never truly stop looking. Tonight, we descend into the predatory silence of the Deep South, where the roads have no names, and the grocery store aisles hold more than just shadows. These are 3 accounts of the moment the mundane curdled into the monstrous. Stories of the unblinking, the hungry, and the obsessed. Lock your doors and dim the lights. You aren't as alone as you think. 15 years ago, I was a youth of 19, possessed by the reckless arrogance of the uninitiated. My cousin had brokered a deal for me to work for her uncle's glass empire, a titan of industry that raised shimmering monoliths of obsidian and crystal toward the heavens. The task required me to abandon the familiar humidity of Tampa for the salt-cracked shores of Destin, Florida. But before the labor began, I hungered for the warmth of family in Russellville, Alabama. I set out in a decaying green Mercury Sable, a metal carcass that groaned like a restless whole. My parents, sensing an ill omen in the wind, pleaded with me to pack provisions, water, food, and the talismans of survival. I dismissed them with the laughter of a fool. I believed that in the modern age, with my glowing Razor flip phone and the neon sanctuaries of gas stations, I was beyond the reach of the old shadows. I did not realize that I was driving straight into a barzakh, a cold liminal void where the laws of the city do not apply. The journey began as a flight of freedom, but as the sun dipped below the horizon, the air turned necrotic. I was a child of the sun, ignorant of how the breath of the north could freeze the very marrow in one's bones. It was then I discovered the first betrayal of my iron steed. The heater was dead, its spirit extinguished. I was alone in the biting cold, steering a coffin of glass and steel through a deepening, unnatural silence. Fatigue began to weigh on my eyelids like the heavy hands of a married. I had made far more stops than I anticipated, and the once familiar interstate began to feel like a tightening coil. Driven by exhaustion and a desperate need for a shortcut, I veered off the main artery and onto the smaller, numbered roads of rural Alabama. In Florida, roads had names, identities, but here they were merely numbers, cold and mathematical, etched into the darkness. Soon the pavement surrendered to the crunch of gravel. This was the era of MapQuest. There was no digital voice to guide me or reroute me from the abyss. I was navigating by ink and paper, a blind man tracing the veins of a ghost. My stomach began to growl, a hollow echo of my parents' warnings. Hunger was no longer a mere physical sensation. It was a gnawing void that made the surrounding woods seem to lean closer, whispering secrets I could not understand. I bypassed several turns for food, terrified that leaving the prescribed path would cause me to vanish into the Sijin, the deepest prison of the lost. I needed something visible, something right off the shoulder of the road. I prayed for a sign, and like a cruel jest from a malevolent spirit, my prayers were answered. An old, weather-beaten grocery store emerged from the gloom on my right. It bore no name, only the word grocery painted across its white, peeling facade in a script that looked like a fading curse. A single flickering light illuminated the sign, though the windows behind it were shrouded in an impenetrable, ink-black gloom. The silence of the Alabama woods was heavy, a suffocating shroud that seemed to dampen the very sound of my tires on the gravel. I pulled into the lot, the flickering light above the sign casting long, rhythmic shadows like the beating of a dying heart. My intuition, that primal sense gifted by the Phaetra to warn of unseen predators, screamed at me to keep driving, yet the hunger was a persistent demon and the cold was a blade at my throat. As I approached the glass door, I saw a movement, a shadow, swift and fluid, darting across the back of the long, dark aisles. It moved with an unnatural grace, not unlike a djinn avoiding the light. I pressed my face to the glass. To my surprise, the door yielded with a soft, inviting click. The air that escaped from the interior was stagnant and ancient, carrying the copper tang of old blood and the sweetness of rot. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding thin and brittle in the vast, dark space. "Anyone here?" Silence was my only answer. I stepped further into the gloom, the floorboards groaning under my weight like the joints of a restless skeleton. "I saw you when I pulled up," I tried again, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I was hoping you were still open." I reasoned that perhaps the keeper was elderly or hard of hearing, a soul tethered to this place long past its prime. I ventured deeper into the aisles, where the shelves were lined with dusty, forgotten offerings, hoping to find something sealed, something untainted by the foul air of the shop. From the suffocating darkness of the rear storage, a figure emerged. He moved without the sound of footsteps, a specter stepping into the dim light of the aisles. "Oh, I'm so sorry. We were just about to close. How can I help you?" he asked, his voice a smooth, terrifying silk. He was not the withered old man I had conjured in my mind, but a man in his third decade, his form sharp and predatory. My breath caught in my throat. It felt as though I were standing before a shaitan in human skin. He wore a smile that was wide and ivory, but his eyes, dark, hollow pits, remained fixed and unblinking. There was no warmth in his gaze, no movement in the muscles of his face. It was a mask of meat, a hollow imitation of human emotion that sent a cold shiver of khawf, dread, through my soul. "I just came up from Florida," I stammered, trying to mask my trembling. "Long drive. I was hoping you had something to eat." "We have plenty," he replied, his gaze never wavering, locking on to me like a curse. "What are you looking for, exactly?" I mentioned chips and a soda. My eyes darted toward the exit. He walked past me with a predatory grace and reached for the door. The sound of the lock clicking into place echoed like a gavel in a death sentence. "Don't want anyone else walking in," he chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. He gestured toward the back, toward the heavy plastic flaps that veiled the darkness of the storeroom. "Follow me. We have all the good stuff in the back. Come, take your pick." The air grew thick with a stench of 1,000 deaths. I followed his gaze toward the meat section, where the dim, dying light revealed a horror. Flies swarmed over gray, bloated packages of flesh that looked far more ancient than anything found in a common pantry. It was the scent of a janaza, a funeral left to rot in the summer sun. "I'll just take this, if that's all right," I whispered, my voice trembling as I grabbed a dusty bag of chips from a nearby shelf. I began to step backward, my eyes fixed on the plastic flaps that swayed like the veils of the underworld. "Trust me, those are no good," the man said, his smile stretching even wider, his unblinking eyes boring into mine. He reached for the plastic divider, inviting me into the lightless void behind him. I have way better stuff back here, fresh just for you. In that moment, the nafs, my very soul, screamed of the trap. I faked a frantic pat of my pockets. "Oh man, I think I forgot my wallet in my car. I'll be right back." Before he could utter another syllable, I spun around. My walk became a jog, then a desperate sprint. I reached the door and fumbled with the lock, my fingers slick with cold sweat. Click! The metal gave way. I burst into the night air, casting one final glance over my shoulder. The man was gone. He had vanished into the shadows of the aisles, as if he had never been more than a phantasm of the woods. I dived into my car, the engine roaring to life with a desperate prayer, and I tore out of that gravel lot. I did not stop. I did not look back until the lights of my cousin's home broke the darkness of the Alabama night. I had survived the store of the nameless, but I knew then that the road has eyes, and some of them never close. I almost stopped the video here, because what appears next isn't human. Nahid Hassan kept saying one thing. It's standing behind me. If you're still watching, subscribe to Nightfall Series 2. The memories of my 7th year are stained with the scent of ozone and the chill of a lingering shadow. My twin sister, Cass, and I were reflections of one another, long golden hair and matching dresses that often drew the gaze of onlookers. We were used to the oohs and ahs of the mundane world, but that day at our local Sure-Fine grocery store, we encountered a gaze that felt like a seer, a dark enchantment. We had barely crossed the threshold when a man, no more than 10 feet away, caught sight of us. His reaction was visceral. He whipped his head back toward us, his neck straining, as if he had spotted 2 rare birds he intended to cage. He was a bulky creature, middle-aged, with features that spoke of distant, sun-scorched lands, his face a rugged landscape of scruff and malice. A husky, jagged smile spread across his lips as his eyes raked over us, up and down, with a hunger that was not of the stomach. My mother, a woman who had weathered the storms of many a predatory man, paid him no mind. Her spirit hardened against such trivialities, but Cass and I felt the was-was, the whispering of an evil presence. I leaned toward my sister, grumbling in a low voice about the filth we saw behind his eyes. We turned left to begin our trek through the aisles, but as we looked back, we saw the man abandon his path. He was coming for us, his shopping cart rattling like the chains of a marid. The man vanished as we reached the final corridors of the store. For a brief moment, the oppressive weight lifted and the innocence of childhood reclaimed us. Cass and I shifted our focus to the mundane desires of our age, our terror eclipsed by the sight of the colorful sugar shrines at the checkout. We began our rhythmic pleading, begging our mother for a candy bar, a small comfort to banish the lingering chill of the man with the empty cart. But the atmosphere shifted as we reached the registers. My mother's face, usually a fortress of stoic resolve, suddenly hardened with frustration. "We don't have the money for it," she snapped, her voice sharp with the stress of the world. We pouted, our small spirits dampened as she began to unload the groceries onto the moving black belt. Then, the world seemed to freeze. As my mother turned back to face us, her expression didn't just change, it shattered. Her eyes shifted to the space directly behind our shoulders, widening in a look of pure, unadulterated horror. We spun around, and my heart nearly stopped. The man was there. He had closed the distance in total silence, standing less than a foot away. He was bathed in a sheen of oily sweat, his chest heaving, his presence radiating a heat that felt like the breath of a nar, a fire. He was so close I could smell the stale, metallic scent of his skin. The man let out an awkward, jagged laugh that rattled in his throat like stones in a dry well. "Sorry, ma'am," he wheezed, his voice thick and heavy. "I didn't mean to scare your girls. They're just so beautiful." He leaned in closer, the stench of his frantic perspiration filling our lungs. "Are they yours?" My mother scoffed, a defensive snarl curling her lip. "Yes, they're mine." He laughed again, a sound devoid of joy, more akin to the cackle of a ghoul finding a fresh grave. "I couldn't help but notice you don't have the money to get them what they want." He wiped a hand across his brow, leaving a streak of grime behind. "How old are they? And you as well. I could help you. I have lots of money. Money is no problem for me." My mother's face furrowed in a mask of confusion and rising fury. "Excuse me?" she snapped, her maternal instincts finally flaring like a holy fire. "I'm serious," he continued, his eyes darting between Cass and me with a terrifying hunger. "How much? How much for the girls? I'd like both of them. But if you could only part with one, I could still make that work. Name your price. I can give them anything, any candy they want." He grinned, revealing teeth that looked like yellowed tombstone fragments, his gaze lingering on us, as if we were livestock at a demonic market. My mother did not hesitate. The air around her seemed to vibrate with a protective baraka as she reached out and pulled us toward her with a strength that brooked no argument. "Here, now," she growled, her voice dropping to a register that sounded like grinding stone. The cashier, a girl of no more than 17, stared with wide, glassy eyes, her hands trembling as she continued to scan the items in a rhythmic, mechanical trance. She was witnessing a transaction of the damned. Once we were tucked safely behind the fortress of our mother's arms, she turned to the man, her stature seeming to grow until she loomed over his bulky frame. "If you so much as lay one finger on my kids," she hissed, her eyes burning with a righteous fury, "I'll break it off and shove it down your throat." The man's face underwent a hideous transformation. The fawning smile vanished, replaced by a darkening of the features that revealed the zulm, the cruelty within. Without a word, without purchasing a single item, he turned and stalked out of the store. But he did not depart. The front of the market was a wall of glass, and moments later, we watched in silent horror as he pressed his face against the pane. He stared in, his features distorted by the pressure, leaving a greasy, sweaty print on the glass, a mark of his obsession. The manager was summoned, the police were called, and we were escorted to our car under a veil of watchful eyes. We fled into the night, leaving behind the sweaty ghost at the window, praying that the price he sought would never be paid. 4 years ago, when I was 20, I encountered a soul that would become my persistent shadow. It was the season of cooling winds, and he stood outside the grocery store, a sentinel for the Salvation Army. I have always carried a spirit of kindness, a desire to offer a pleasant word to those who labor in the public eye, unaware that some kindnesses act as an unintended invitation to the Karin, the dark companion. The young man was of my own years, yet he possessed a stature that was unsettling. He was a towering figure, over 6 feet 4 inches, with a haunting resemblance to the macabre Lurch from the old tales. His skin was pale, stretched thin over a hollow frame, and beneath his dark, vacant eyes sat heavy circles that whispered of sleepless nights spent in the void. His hair was a shock of short, obsidian strands. I offered him a brief window of my time, perhaps 2 minutes of idle conversation regarding the shifting weather and the coming frost. It was a mundane exchange, or so I believed. I offered a wave and retreated to the safety of my home, never suspecting that this fleeting moment of warmth had ignited a cold, obsessive fire in a stranger's heart. I did not know that I had just signed a contract with a stalker whose gaze would soon become my constant, invisible shackle. This is where the real horror begins. And trust me, what happens next, you won't forget. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe to Nightfall Horror 002, because something even more terrifying is coming. Months drifted by like falling leaves, and the memory of the tall stranger began to fade into the recesses of my mind. The sikh of his presence had seemingly dissipated until the day the sun failed to warm the air inside the market. I was shopping with a friend, our laughter filling the aisles, when the atmosphere suddenly curdled. My friend's voice died in her throat. She recoiled, her eyes widening as if she had looked upon an Ifrit. I turned, and the breath was stolen from my lungs. He was there. The towering figure from the winter stood directly behind me, a monolith of flesh and bone. He was so close, barely 8 inches separated our bodies, that I could feel the cold radiating from his frame. He spoke my name, or rather, he spoke of our meeting. He remembered the exact day in December when I had offered him those few fateful minutes of my life. With a low, vibrating tone, he demanded my number. Panic, a cold and sharp howf began to coil in my chest. In my youth and naivety, I lacked the steel to refuse him outright. I lied, claiming I had not memorized my own digits, and offered to take his instead. I pulled out my phone, angled so he could see the glowing image of my boyfriend on the screen, a protective talisman meant to ward him off. I made a point to mention my commitment, hoping the shaitan would take the hint and retreat. He did not. He recited his number, and as I tucked my phone away, he leaned down until his breath brushed my ear. "Whatever I text you," he whispered, his voice a low, gravelly rasp that made my blood run cold, "is for your eyes only." The encounter left a stain on my soul that no amount of prayer could cleanse. I blocked his number immediately, casting it into the digital sijin, but the physical world offered no such sanctuary. In the months that followed, the grocery store, once a place of mundane sustenance, transformed into a hunting ground. He became a constant fixture of my reality, a Kareen that manifested whenever I crossed the threshold of the market. It didn't matter which hour I chose or which checkout lane I frequented, he would materialize at the end of the aisle like a specter summoned by my very presence. I would see him out of the corner of my eye, a towering silhouette standing motionless amongst the produce, his vacant eyes boring into the side of my head. The fear began to erode my resolve. Once I even caught him following me out into the asphalt wasteland of the parking lot, his long strides eating the distance between us like a predator closing in on a wounded deer. I finally sought the aid of the temple guardians, the store managers. I poured out my heart, describing the unblinking gaze and the whispered threats. They promised to intervene, to cast a circle of protection around me by forbidding him to speak to me. But while his tongue was silenced, his eyes remained hungry. He continued to haunt the aisles, a silent, looming sentinel of the dark. A week of restless nights passed before I returned to the market, driven by a stubborn refusal to let this Zalim, oppressor, dictate my life. I went only for a few items, a brief errand under the setting sun. As I approached the entrance, I saw him, a dark tower standing near the glass doors. I felt his gaze shift toward me, a heavy, physical weight. I ducked inside, my heart racing with the rhythm of a cornered animal, hoping to lose myself in the crowded aisles. But there is no hiding from a shadow that knows your soul. Minutes later, at the very back of the store, I looked up to find him standing at the end of the aisle. He wasn't shopping, he was simply existing in my space, his vacant eyes tracking my every move. I abandoned my task and made a panicked beeline for the front, my breath coming in shallow, jagged gasps. Before reaching the registers, I dove behind a large cardboard display, crouching low. I watched through the gaps in the shelving like a soldier in a trench. I saw him emerge from the aisles, his head swiveling as he scanned the checkout lines. When he failed to find me, he stepped through the automatic doors and out into the cooling night. Seizing the moment, I rushed to the nearest cashier, my fingers trembling as I paid. I peered out the door, searching for the tall silhouette in the twilight. Seeing nothing, I began a frantic dash toward the far side of the parking lot, where my car sat, a lone island in a sea of asphalt. I sprinted toward my car, my keys clutched like a silver dagger in my hand. Halfway across the expanse, I looked back and saw him. He was standing by the main entrance, his tall frame cutting a jagged silhouette against the store's fluorescent glow. I ducked behind a concrete pillar, my lungs burning with the air of 1,000 fears. From my hiding place, I watched as he scanned the horizon, his head moving with the slow, mechanical precision of a roadside observer. When he turned his back, I made a final, desperate run. I reached my car, threw myself inside, and slammed the locks. The sound of the deadbolts engaging was the only prayer I had left. But as I looked up through the windshield, my heart froze. He was there. Standing a mere 15 feet away, he gripped the handle of a stray shopping cart. He didn't move. He simply stared, his vacant eyes locked onto mine through the glass. It was a silent declaration of war. He knew he had chased me. He knew I was terrified, and he held the cart as a pathetic, hollow alibi to mask his predatory intent. I felt the thulm, the darkness of his obsession pressing against the windows of my car. I fled to the safety of my family, my spirit broken and shivering. When I told my grandfather, the old man's eyes kindled with a protective fire.
He drove me back to that cursed place and stood before the managers like a lion, demanding they banish the shadow or face the wrath of the law. The tall man was not seen again when I walked those aisles, though my friends whispered that he still lurked in the corners when I was absent. Eventually, the store purged him, or perhaps he simply drifted to another hunting ground. I am safe now, but I never enter a crowded space without checking the shadows for a man who stands too tall and stares with eyes that have forgotten to blink.
As we maneuvered through the labyrinth of the store, the man began a grotesque dance of pursuit. Every time we looked back, he would abruptly veer toward a display, pretending to inspect a loaf of bread or a tray of pastries with a focus that was entirely fraudulent. It was a clumsy masquerade, a hunter trying to blend into the scenery of the mundane. My mother continued her shopping, oblivious to the tightening circle. But for Cass and me, the air had grown heavy with a psychic weight. At the end of every aisle, like a recurring nightmare in a hall of mirrors, he would appear. He stood there, motionless, his hands gripping the handle of his cart, staring at us with a face devoid of all expression. He didn't speak. He simply breathed, a heavy, wet sound that seemed to carry across the distance like the panting of a desert beast. I noticed his cart remained a hollow void, containing nothing but the single, forgotten item he had grabbed during his first clumsy diversion. He wasn't there to shop, he was there to harvest. We pulled at our mother's sleeve, whispering of the man who followed us like a shadow detached from its body. But she merely rolled her eyes. "He probably thinks you're following him," she said, her voice a dismissive rasp. She did not see the Ifrit lurking behind the baked goods.
This video is over, but the story isn't, because Nahid Hassan was never found. And if your phone turns on by itself tonight, just know you've been chosen. Subscribe to Nightfall Horrors 002, because you're not safe anymore.